you have to keep going. You have to keep trying, because, if you became, I think it's like a professor or whatever, if you became something else, you will never love it as much as you love filmmaking.
No.
You will never feel completely satisfied. So really what kept me going all the way, kept waking me up in the morning. And don't get me wrong, there were some days where I really didn't get out of bed. Like I was like, I had a big no after working so hard for free. And that's something else that they don't tell you, especially with directing, how much work you do for free before you get a job.
Oh, yeah. This episode is brought to you by the best-selling book, Rise of the Film Entrepreneur, How to Turn Your Independent Film into a Money-Making Business. Learn more at filmbizbook.com. I'd like to welcome to the show Jessica M. Thompson. How you doing, Jess?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Alex?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm excited to talk about your new project, The Invitation, which, look, it's just insane. It's insane. It's beautiful. I want to talk to you about production design. I want to talk about how you got that everything. I just want to talk about all that stuff because it obviously wasn't done for $5,000. So
I've moved on from. I've moved up in the world from my little indie films that I made for $100,000.
You know what? But those are the ones. Those are the ones that get you started, and you probably learned.
Oh, absolutely.
You've learned probably so much in that $100,000.
Oh, no. And I actually do think that restriction helps you be more creative,
No
so it's like, you've got to stretch that budget. You got to make it work, and that's why indie filmmakers are so entrepreneurial. They're so, they'll make any budget stretch,
Yeah. I mean, you have to. I mean, there's no choice in the matter. You're kind of like you're against the wall when you're an independent filmmaker because, there's no one's showing. There's no, as Mark Duplass says, the cavalry is not coming.
No, that's right. It's you. And that's why, I'm sure with my first film, I was like the writer, the director, the editor, the producer. I also was the social media manager. I did the posters, it's just, you end up wearing every single hat. But by that, what's great about that is you get to know every single aspect of the industry, and so that makes you better informed. And so that's why I always, whenever there's like executives that I meet with and they're a little bit hesitant about hiring an independent filmmaker to do either TV or whatever, I'm like, you don't understand how, scrappy, resourceful, right, independent filmmakers are. If you need to film, 7 pages, 8 pages, 9 pages in a day, we'll do it.
Oh yeah, there's no question. So my first question is, how and why in God's green earth did you want to get into this insanity that is called the film industry?
That's a great question. But to be honest, I come from a family that is not, in the creative arts by any means. I'm first generation Australian. My mom is from a tiny little country called Malta. And so we grew up very much blue collar roots. She's a single mom. I have 3 siblings, and at 12 years old, I watched Braveheart and I decided I want to tell stories on film.
How old were you when you watched Braveheart?
Well, May 15th. I can't remember the year, but May 15th, and I was 12 years old.
Wow.
It was one of those Blockbuster Fridays, where the family goes down to Blockbuster and picks them, and the new big hit was like Braveheart. So we all watched it, and because, like I said, I was the youngest of 4. Right before the end, my mum was like, Jess, she paused it and was, I can spoil Braveheart. Everyone should have watched it by now. Yeah. But right before William Wallace gets drawn, and quartered, she paused it. She's like, Jess, you're too young for this. Go to bed.
Really? And I was now?
I was like, what? No, Mom, you can't do this to me. And so, as we say in Australia, I chucked a tanty, threw a tantrum, and stormed upstairs. And I did this crazy thing where, those big old school alarm clocks. This is before the internet, kids, before mobile phones, before iPhones or whatever. So I set my alarm clock to 2:30 in the morning, and I put it inside my pillowcase, and it so that it would wake me up but not wake up the rest of the house. And I crept downstairs and I rewound it, and I had to rewind because it was VHS, and I had to not watch what happened around it and watched it. And then I was like, that's it. The story just moved me so much. I just wanted to tell stories. So I opened up the yellow pages.
How is that possible? You look like you're 20, my dear. How is that possible? You don't even know what a yellow page is.
I'll take the compliment. But so I opened up the yellow pages and I looked up film schools, places to go to. And like I said, we grew up on welfare. We had, luckily the government in Australia is very kind to its citizens, and my mum couldn't afford it, so I went to work at Toys R Us to pay for my screenwriting classes, my acting classes, my directing classes, and I've never looked back. I've never wavered.
So the fascinating part about that story is that at the end, is when your mom said, I think this is a little bit too much for you. Not the decapitations or the legs being cut off or anything of
or
the blood
the horse dying. I always find that so that
the horse dying.
Or the 100 horses that died. I don't know.
You know what is so funny about that movie? That horse dying sticks out in so many people's head, even though it's a fake horse, obviously, but it sticks out in people's head more than the thousands of men.
Well, that was like Francis Ford. Well, Francis Ford Coppola with Apocalypse Now, that whole scene where he picks up the Labrador puppy and they hold the gun to its head, that's the scene that people remember. And even his whole point of putting that in was like, we have become so desensitized to the death of humans and the violence against humans. And it's such a great visual way to tell that. And of course, as soon as that happens, everyone in the theater, I mean, I am a bit too young. I did not watch that in the theaters, but
But then when he was slicing, they were killing was it the calf or the cow while they were killing Marlon Brando. Again, sorry, spoiler alert, guys. If you haven't, it's not our fault.
These are all movies that everyone listening to this podcast would have listened to. Would have watched. If
they haven't, it's not my fault. These are prerequisites. These are prerequisites. So all right, so. When you started going down this journey, I'm assuming coming from Australia, Hollywood just called you, right? And just said, hey, can you come over? What movie do you want and how much money do you want?
That's how it works. They're like, you've got like a really great accent. You're here, you're in it. No, so what happened was at 18, I went to film school in Australia called University of Technology, Sydney. They have a really good film program there. It was super hard to get into. I was the only kid from that side of town. I know people listening might be more American skewed, but I come from like the not pretty Bondi Beach part of Sydney, basically. So I used to have to commute to university an hour and a half there, an hour and a half back. But I was with all these posh yuppies whose parents were in the film industry already. So I already had to, compete with these kids. And I just put my all into it. We went to a technological film school. So we had access to 16 millimeter cameras. We had access to digital camera, everything. I learned to edit on a Steenbeck originally, and that was just to show us the trade. That's not because of my age.
I did as well.
We did and so we made a film almost every month. Like you had access to industry standard equipment and recording studios and things like that. So you were encouraged to use that as much as possible. And I just did. I just dived in and did it. And it's through university, through film school that I really fell in love with editing. And I realized how important editing is to crafting a story. It's basically, the three storytellers, the writer, the director, and the editor. And you can make a completely different film in the edit room, right? So so then I looked at some of my favorite directors, and a lot of them have an editing background, like Joel and Cohen, Kurosawa even, so I decided after that to go into editing. It felt like a bit more of a clear path than doing the production hustle. That being said, I've also done production managing and things like that, but so I got into editing, climbed up the ranks, only doing commercials and music videos at that point. Did one documentary, and then I kept applying. I kept making short films. I kept applying for grants. In Australia, most things get done through the government there, which is called Screen Australia. It's like it's like really the only thing to get anything made in Australia. And I just found I couldn't break in Australia. I couldn't. It's a smaller industry, obviously, but we have a lot of American productions that come down there, which is great. We have the Thors and the Batmans and all that come down there and shoot, the Aquamans and stuff. So, but that's not really, if you want to be a writer-director, doesn't give you that opportunity. Yeah, because they're going to bring over the American directors and stuff. So
so let me ask you, because your path is similar to mine, because I started in the editing world as well. That's how I learned the Avid. I did edit on Steenbeck. I thought it was the most.
No, I did the Avid as well. The Steenbeck was nice just for
It was. This is the way in my school they taught me nonlinear editing, online editing. And then they took me to a Steenbeck. I'm like, what are you, savages? Like, what is this? Like, you want me to cut film with a scissor or a razor?
And how fun is it? It's
no, but it was mind blowing to me. Like, and you want me to put tape on it if I'm kind of on the fence. But if you really like the cut, you glue it. Are we like, how is, like, it would blow my mind.
And to do a crossfade, you like actually like crossfade it. I was like, oh my gosh.
What is going on? By the way, I have to ask because in America, in every film school in the country, when you use the Steam Deck, you always use the same footage. It was just stock footage, the same one. It was an episode of Gunsmoke.
Aha. No, we did not do that.
Well, it wasn't okay. I was wondering what that would do because from USC to NYU to my little school down in Orlando, they all used the Gunsmoke. And because when I talk to other editors or other filmmakers, I'm like, oh, I cut on Steam. Like, do you do Gunsmoke? Yeah, that's what we did.
I hope Gunsmoke is getting some residuals from this. But
I think Gunsmoke's okay.
We had to we shot on, it was our own films. We shot on 6
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So I did the same thing, and because I wanted to be a director, so I was like, I'm going to go through the editing process because I was like, I don't want to be on set because I did the set thing. And waking up at 3:00 in the morning for like $50 to be a PA, and then just sitting somewhere not even near set, in the mud somewhere, driving, telling people where to park. I was like, this sucks. This is not where I want to go.
And also when you think about it with editing, you're one step away from you're right there. You're working with the directors, you're working with the producers.
Absolutely.
So therefore, when you're a PA or, you're so far, you never even meet those people. You never even get to interact with them, though it's great experience. Don't get me wrong. I think everyone should pay their dues and, work on sets as well. But I think it's like, I don't know. I found editing to be a bit more of a clearer defined path for me. And also, it's an incredible skill to know, and it helps you as a director. So
massively, it massively helps you as a director. So let me ask you, how did you make the transition from Australia to the US? What was that? Because I think that's where the interesting part is in your story, because you had to come up. It was tough in Australia, but now you're a little fish in a very big pond out here. So how did you make that transition, and how did you even just get work and survive?
Yeah, so I was 24 when I moved over to the States. I got to LA for 6 weeks and was like, nope, not for me. At the time, I now do live in LA, but at the time, LA is a brutal place when you don't know anyone. I literally knew nobody in the States, like zero connections. I decided to go on a road trip for 9 months, and I visited 40 states and a lot of Canada as well. And I filmed, this was during the 2009 kind of financial crisis, and I shot a little like kind of documentary road story, meeting some of the people that I met, on the way and things like that. Never finished that film, but it was really fun. I really got to know, I think, the US, my new home. And I landed in New York. It was a bad decision in that I really used up a lot of my money on that road trip.
You're 24. Don't beat yourself up. You're 24. We were all idiots at 24.
I know. And I slept in the back of my car. I made it very, I did it very low key, but got to New York and knew as the second I landed in New York, I was like, this is my home city. I love this place. Like I said, moved there with very little money. And because I had these skills as an editor, I started to get freelance work as a commercial editor. Yep. But of course, knowing that I wanted to kind of transition into features. So I actually took a step back in my career and took an assistant editing job with Liz Garbus. She's done a lot of great documentaries. She did the Nina Simone one recently on a HBO film called There's Something Wrong with Aunt Diane. And then what was great is she brought me into her next film, which was called Love Marilyn. And that was actually a narrative documentary hybrid. And she brought me in to edit that one. So then I got to, so then I was off. So then I started to get a lot of editing, and being which is a bit easier. Women documentarians and filmmaker in the industry, in the film industry, are definitely like much more common and more accepted. So it felt like a little bit easier to break in that regard. And I feel documentary and narrative, they're all storytelling, right? To me, we put such a divider between them, but especially in terms of editing, because you just get all the footage and then they're like, okay, make a story. You're like, okay. So with for instance, the Greg Louganis documentary that I edited for HBO, like that had archival from like multiple Olympics. And I should say my brother was an Olympian, so that's why I was really interested in like this, what happens to our Olympians once they're kind of done. And especially when, Greg being queer and HIV positive, he really didn't have an easy go, even though he's like the best diver in the world. So I was really interested in that story. But then we had sit-down interviews, and then we had Veride footage, and it's literally like, craft the story. And that was really, in terms of screenwriting, that's a really incredible process to go through, it's a really great skill to know. Yeah, and then basically I felt I'd made another short film in New York, and then I felt ready. I had written The Light of the Moon. I realized a lot of my ideas actually are bigger than The Light of the Moon.
Shocking.
They're
Shocking.
Yeah, shocking. So a lot of them are more sci-fi or more genre-based, and I have a joke that the friend that I made day one of film school, Carlo Vallejo, he's produced all of my short films and produced The Light of the Moon with me. And I have a joke that he said to me, "Okay, Jess, you've got 2 characters in 6 locations. Now write something." Like he was like, "You keep writing things that are just too big to make. Like you need
45 locations, five company moves in a day. Yeah, got it."
Yeah. So he's like, "That's all we'll be able to fundraise." So we did that. So I did that, and The Light of the Moon came to me, unfortunately, because it happened to a friend of mine. And I said to her, "I haven't seen this story told in an authentic way, about a woman's recovery and about how it affects her relationship to work. But also when she really doesn't want to be the label of a survivor or a victim. Like she's like, no, right. She just wants to keep her sense of humor. She wants to she doesn't want her friends to worry about her." And I just thought that was a really interesting modern story and one that had not been did very well. So I wrote it. And then we made it for $100,000. And it
did its job because it got you your new film, The Invitation. But before we get to The Invitation,
I want to say that everybody we'll get back to that, every single person who in The Light of the Moon, I'm so glad that their star has risen because of that film. From the producers to the actors to the hair and makeup artists, everyone. I love that when everyone puts their heart and soul into something, and it really pays off for everyone. Yeah.
Now, you also did an apprenticeship on The Handmaid's Tale, which is, to be fair, not a bad apprenticeship. I mean, if you're going to do one, I would have liked that. That would have been nice. So
that's literally what I told my reps. I mean, so that was after The Light of the Moon, and I met my managers at South by Southwest, which I really was ill prepared for. I did not realize how much film festivals are just like a meat market. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. That's gross.
Well, it is at the top guys, like Sundance, South by, Tribeca, like some of the big boys, they are something like that. But yeah, if you got a movie in there, you'll get.
Yeah, so you're also, and we sold the film at the festival, which sometimes doesn't happen. We were very fortunate that it did happen to us. So you're having those meetings, you're meeting lots of managers, and I was like, whoa, this is I thought I was just going to go and watch 100 movies. No, I saw 3 films. It was so sad. So I met my reps there who have just been incredible supporters of mine. And I said to them, I really want to do an apprentice and I want to do it on The Handmaid's Tale. And they made it happen. Now, I will say, as glamorous, and it was fantastic. And it really helped me, and it was an incredible experience. But what they don't tell you is that you pay your way. You pay for the flights, you pay for your accommodation. It's expensive, and it's really it shows you how classless this industry is. So I really went into the red that year, and I'm very grateful that because I came up in commercials that I had a little bit of savings behind me. But I'd maxed out my credit cards to make the film. I donated my eggs to make the film.
I've had another film. I had a filmmaker who came on who donated her eggs. And
was her name Sonia O'Hara?
Of course, Sonia. Yeah, she was in my last movie. She was the star of my last movie.
Oh, yeah, she's my best friend.
Is she? Sonia's amazing. I love Sonia.
Yeah, but we actually donated our eggs separately. Did not know each other, and then met, and we were like, "Hey, you must be the only other person to have done this. Let's do it."
So what were some lessons you picked up on Handmaid's Tale? Because that's a heck of a set to be on.
Yeah, I mean, it was really that scaling up of all the ideas that you have, right? So it's you know how to do it, about doing it on that scale and doing it with that time frame, doing it with that amount of departments, that amount of there's so many people. It's such a well-oiled machine, that show. And actors really know their characters inside and out. So a lot of your work as a director, if you're coming in episodically, is already done in terms of, your actor. It's not like you're doing extensive rehearsals or anything like that, because unless there's a specific scene that's a little bit gnarly or something. So, I learned so much about the pace of TV and and how quickly everything moves and how well, I learned how your first AD can really make or break a day, things like that.
Oh, yeah.
And really saw that come into action. It's basically taking what you know and doing it on a small, obviously we had 15 days to shoot The Light of the Moon. So then going from that and scaling up and having, 5 days 12 days an episode for an hour, 13 days an episode is like such a joy and such a, but you've got to make sure those days are running really smoothly. So I learned a lot and really learned about Mike Barker, who was the director I was shadowing, was an absolute legend. And he really kind of showed me his process and how he goes about kind of formulating the story, cracking the story and figuring out. And also, the biggest thing I learned was that the scripts come in the morning of. And it's crazy that, like, to me, I've always had the privilege, and luckily, even with my TV series, The End that I did, Sam Strass had written every single episode before I even came on board. So that's a big privilege in the TV industry, And a lot of the time, you've got the idea of the episode. You're told you're told what kind of locations you'll need, but you quite often won't have the final script till the morning that you're shooting. And that it taught me that I have to kind of relinquish control sometimes and just go with the flow.
Wow. It's I've been on many sets on TV sets, and it's amazing how insane it's organized chaos in so many ways, because everybody knows what they're doing. The machine is running, but stuff like that happens. You just and then the actors just go, they just learn their lines quickly. And I mean, isn't it wonderful? Because I mean, you've worked in the indie space and you've worked in the professional, like really high-end professional space. Isn't it wonderful when you get to work with like quality professional actors? You just don't have to. They like learn your lines, man. You hit your mark, man. Like none of that. That's all. They just know what they're doing, and you basically are just there to capture the lightning, as I say. I mean, consummate professionals. It really does make a difference, right? Now, when you first walked on a set as a director in a professional manner, not your indie project, but in a professional set of a television show or something, what was that day like for you? Because at that point, you've already got a handful of hours under your belt, hundreds of hours probably under your belt of being on set, one way, shape, or form, plus all your experience in the editing room. But that first day, when they're like, there's a check at the end of the week for you, and you're walking in and you're like, I got to run this whole thing, and these guys all know a hell of a lot more than I do probably. What was that feeling like?
I mean, first of all, I never sleep the day before I shoot. So it's just, I always try every technique. I get the lavender scented candles out, and listening to hypnosis and sleep stories and things
Valerian
like that.
Roots.
It doesn't matter. None of it. I take all the melatonin. None of it works. I just know now that I will be up all night. And it's fine because the next day you're just on pure adrenaline, right? But that first day was on the set of The End. And I mean, it's your heart is buzzing. You're just, so you can't wipe the smile of your face. But also there's like a nervous energy. There's a nervous, anticipation, to, all the things that you've been working towards, all the things you've been studying, all that now it's coming into play. And I can feel, there's this kind of, it happens on every set where the kind of executives and the producers, they all kind of lean in a little bit. They're all a little bit like, okay, this, we know this woman's incredible. We really love her work, but does she have the goods? And then I love that throughout that first day, when that first like kind of take and that first, the scene starts to come together and whatever. And I love feeling that relaxed moment where everyone's just like, oh, she knows what she's doing.
She's okay. Okay, good. She knows what a camera is. She knows what an actor is. Fantastic.
Yeah. She knows how to make it look great. She knows how to get the right performances. Fantastic. And so I love when there's that moment when I feel that element of trust, just like, okay, she got this.
So let me ask you, because so many people don't talk about this, and this is something I love talking about on the show, the politics of the set. Nobody talks about the politics of this, especially when you're a young director, someone coming in for the first time. When you're dealing with some of these veterans on set, I had a script supervisor who was questioning me on set when I was on his job. And I'd already been directing for quite some time, but she didn't know my resume. This is pre-internet, this is pre-IMDb. So nobody knew that, he is a young director. And she was giving me crap every second. And she was questioning me in front of other people every second. And she'd been around forever. And I had to pull her aside. And I'm like, look, man, either get on board or get off the set. And I had to put her in her place. And then after the first day, I think we had, this is an insane amount of setups, but I must have done between the two cameras, about 70 or 80 setups in a 10-hour day. I move really, really quickly. And because of being an editor, I just know what I need. So I just boom, 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 boom. And at the end of the day, I found out that the producer had sent her in as a spy to make sure I was is this guy capable of doing this job? And then at the end, she's like, no, he's perfectly fine. He could do the job. But this is the kind of stuff that you don't talk about. So how did you, I mean, I'm assuming in your career, there's been one or two times that a crew member, a DP or a production designer or a script or a first AD pushed back, or their ego got out of control and you had to kind of step up. What was that like? And how do you deal with those kind of political situations?
I mean, it's luckily the more and more that I've gotten on, the less and less that happens, which is fantastic. But yes, there is definitely something a little bit, I'm sure this shocks you, but like young filmmakers and female filmmakers, I don't think are treated as fairly.
No, stop it.
I know, it's crazy. But I come in and we have a word, bolshy, which I don't think really translates a bit like you've got chutzpah. And I think I've got a lot of chutzpah. So I think I think there's a little bit of respect already that's garnered. But I will say the people that I usually have the biggest problem with is gaffers.
Oh, yes. Gaffers, grips.
Yeah,
grips,
grips less so, but for some reason gaffers, they usually come from this kind of old school
technical, it's all tech.
Tough guy,
eat raw meat on the set. Yeah, got it.
Exactly. Drinking beer out of their camel pack, like whatever. The thing is, I love to take the piss. I love to shoot the shit. I love to, I can keep up with the best of them. But sometimes I just think there's a moment where there's always been a bit of like, look, you need to chill out and you need to listen to me and you need to stop this. Luckily, I will say I've worked with incredible first ADs. I have a real knack for picking a first AD.
Great.
And I've always, gotten along really, really well with my first ADs, and they've always had my back and always kind of helped me navigate those situations. And that's another reason why a first AD is worth their weight in gold, because they really protect the director from some of those situations. And I will say in the commercial, because I did commercial directing as well, DPs in that are a certain type of animal, and I cannot handle the talk back. And I have now I just have a no arsehole policy. So if someone is really doing that, then no, I don't have time for you. Get off my set. Luckily I'm in a position where I'm allowed to do that. But even with the invitation, there's always here's what I say. I'm so good at picking my HODs. I make sure that we have such similar tastes and sensibilities. I look at their resumes, I look what they do, and I make sure that we've got it's like a mind meld, right? But there's always going to be 5% of the time where you disagree, and I think that those 5% is really telling of a person's character and personality. Because I love to collaborate. I want to hear your ideas and why you want to do it that way. And at the end of the day, I'm the director. You gotta do what I say. And so there was, and I won't name names, but there was sometimes even on this set where I was like, oh my gosh, at the end of the day, I understand where you're coming from, but this is where I'm coming from. You need to just do it. But it is hard, and I wish it's getting, like I said, it's getting less and less. And I really do respect everyone owning their opinions, but it's when it's in a disrespectful manner. And I will say, I want to shout out to the Hungarian crews, most respectful crew I've ever worked with. In Australia and America, nothing compares to the Hungarian crews. I was wildly impressed with how much respect. And you can imagine that it's a very male-dominated crew.
Oh yeah.
And still, I never felt like anyone was didn't think I was capable, or everyone really respected me. They even called me Madam Director, which I thought was so funny.
That's actually adorable. I love that. I would like to be Sir Director. That would be nice.
Yeah, I know. I was like, guys, you need to stop it. No, keep going, but stop.
Stop. But please, more of that, please. No, it's important to put these kind of stories out there, because a lot of directors will walk on set and not even know that this is a situation. Because I remember when I first got on set and I had to address something like that, I wasn't prepared. You're just not told about this. You don't have the tools or the ammunition to kind of deal with it. And if you've got you've got a gaffer who's been in the business for 40 years, is like, when I worked with Coppola, I'm like, what do you like? And you're like 25. Yeah, exactly. And there's a reason why you've been hired, right? There's a reason. It's because the studio, the producers, they trust
vision, you know, someone, or the financiers or whoever it is, someone, you're the person with the goods, right? You're the person that hires all these people. So I think as long as there's that respect, and you can tell straight away when someone respects you or not. I mean, I flag it pretty early on if I feel like someone's going to be a problem. Like, and I've never, you know, it's only happened once and it wasn't like wasn't a gap or anything, but I could just tell there was like someone in the camera team once that I was like, no, this guy, he won't look me in the eye. He won't, you know, he like kind of mumbles every time I ask him something. You know, I'm like, we need to replace him. Like, it's just not going to work. Like,
right.
But mostly, you know, mostly people are so excited to make films. People want to, you know, succeed in your vision, especially if after a couple of days and they realize that you're not doing the stock standard wide, mid, close, like, or something, and they feel she's.
Isn't it fun? Isn't it fun when you push a crew and you're like, okay, so we're gonna do this shot like Kubrick did. They're like, oh, it's like, you know, and you'll end up only using about 3 seconds of that 30-second shot. But
yeah, exactly. No, we have this incredible crane shot and then we go to a Ronin handoff, and you know, and it's so joyous when you get this, like, the whole crew working together seamlessly, and the actors knowing their marks and doing all that. Yeah. Oh yeah, but also like the energy in the room when you finally achieve it, and you're like, oh, we got one. You know,
it's remarkable. Now, is there anything that you wish someone would have told you at the beginning of your career? Like, if you could have a chance to go back to the young Jess, who just snuck down to watch the Braveheart ending, and go, look, honey, you're going to be in the film industry, but you need to know this.
Yeah, I mean, there is something the first thing is, I wish I could just tell myself everything is going to be okay, because I honestly used to get so, when, you know, and I'm sure you the same, like when you're working so hard on the script and you get so close and then you don't get it, or you're pitching on a job and you don't get it, and the amount of no's, right? Everyone thinks that, you know, you're a success. They look at your resume, they think, oh, she's had like it easy or something like that. There's so many no's. For every yes, there's like 100 no's, right? And I just wish, because I used to get like so, you know, upset and just trying to like wonder whether I was being a fool, and like whether I was chasing just a dream that was not going to eventuate. I would just go back and but maybe you need to go through that, right? And maybe you need that energy to like get you up in the morning. But I wish I could just like go give me a hug and be like, it'll be okay. You know,
it's gonna be. Just keep going. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
So let me ask you.
But also though, stay true to your vision. Like when someone's trying to push you or challenge you, or push you in a certain direction, just if you in your gut know something is right, just really listen to your gut. So
that's another question I love asking people, because I've asked myself this question after almost 30 years doing this. What kept you going in those times? What kept you going in the no's? I'm assuming it wasn't like a month or two. It might have been a year or two. Could have been years where you maybe get a little win, but you've got like 400 losses, like, and you question I think every filmmaker worth his weight in salt would say at one point or another in the career, is this the right path? Have I made a mistake? Is this worth the pain that I'm going through? How did you keep going?
It's a great question. And I want to let people know that even before, so when we missed the deadline for Sundance, so for The Light of the Moon. So the next one was South by that I really wanted. And we submitted to South by, and we'd already found out that we got into Tribeca, but I really wanted South by. And because we had that pressure of knowing that we got into Tribeca, we tried to say to South by, could you make a decision soon? Because we have to get back into Tribeca, and you know, another incredible festival, but I really wanted South by. And they told me that they would tell us before Christmas, which is very early to know that you got into a March festival, and in competition. And I was waiting. I remember I was in Australia with my mom because my brother had just gotten married, and mom and I were on a road trip. And it was like, I want to say December 22nd or 20. Like, it felt like before Christmas, it was like getting down to the wire. And I remember I had to pull over the car because we were driving. So I was burst into tears, and I was like, is it too late to become a doctor? Like, I was like, Mom's like, it's not Christmas yet. But then you'll never guess, 2 hours later, I get an American call on my cell. I'm like, and I answer it, and it's, you know, and we got into the competition. So I'm saying it happens even when you've made something that you know is good. It's still like, you still have all that doubt. But I think what got me through is sheer desperation. Like, I
Right.
never had a backup. Like, I never was someone, and I'm not saying, that you shouldn't, if everyone's path is different, but there was nothing else that I loved. Like, there was nothing else that I could do, because, so to me, it was like, you have to keep going. You have to keep trying, because, if you became, I think it's like a professor or whatever, if you became something else, you will never love it as much as you love filmmaking.
No.
You will never feel completely satisfied. So really what kept me going all the way, kept waking me up in the morning. And don't get me wrong, there were some days where I really didn't get out of bed. Like, I was like, I had a big no after working so hard for free. And that's something else that they don't tell you, especially with directing, how much work you do for free before you get a job.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's insane. It's insane. The pictures, the amount, the amount of effort, the decks. I'd made, to get the end, I made like an 18-minute video, of like, and did like a montage and did me speaking. Like, this is how, especially when you're starting out, right? You've got to put in so, and then when you get a no at the end of doing all that,
or the money doesn't drop,
or you get a yes, and then the money doesn't come in, or whatever it is.
It's just brutal. It's psychologically what we go through is absolutely brutal. That's why I love asking everybody, from a young filmmaker like yourself all the way to Oscar winners. Everyone goes through the same process. Like everybody. No one is just born and thrown into the mix. They all have a level of it. Even the wonderkins like Robert Rodriguez when he was 23, or Orson Welles when he was 23, if you want to go back that far. But they all go through some sort of struggle, even most of us go through more struggle.
And I knew, I had this skill of editing. I knew that I could be an editor. Like, I know financially, I knew I was like, but it wasn't a love. Like, don't get me wrong. It's a joy. Editing is great, but it's not a deep love. People who are real editors that like want to do that every single day, they've got like a deep passion for editing. So I was like, okay, yeah, sure. So I'm not going to be poor. That's not the problem. But the problem is, am I ever going to, get to tell the stories I want to tell?
So let me, because this is something that only editors who turned into directors we can talk about this. I need some therapy myself. So we're going to talk about this for a second. There's a thing about when, I always said the same thing. I'm like, I always tell people advice when they're coming up, like, what job should I get? I go, find a job inside the business or in the satellite of the business, so you can make connections, you can work with people and making, and that kind of stuff, build those kind of relationships. But as an editor, being in the edit room, I've delivered probably over 50, 60 movies in my day as an editor and colorist, post supervisor, all that kind of stuff. Out of all the projects I've done on my IMDb, maybe 3 or 4 I enjoyed. Like, truly loved the process, loved the filmmakers, loved the rest of them were just a paycheck. Honestly, there is something about being so close to the process and yet not being able to do it yourself. That is a frustration in that. And only an editor who wants to be a director can understand it. Do you feel the same way? Did you feel the same way?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
But I will say, because I edited documentaries, that it was, and I really, and I don't have much of a desire to direct documentaries. I actually, I don't think I have any. Unless, it depends. Maybe I won't say
except that one that never got finished.
Oh yeah. That's why I didn't finish it. But no, I've always wanted to direct narrative. So to me, I had that distinction because so at least it was like a different part of my brain. Even though I truly believe that documentary narrative is all the same tools, it's all the same storytelling. It's got a start, middle, and end. It's got the climax, everything. But so to me, I at least never had that. I want to do this, or I could do this better than, And this afternoon I'm meeting up with Cheryl Fajanic, who's the director of Back on Board. So that shows you how much I loved, editing that film with her. But yes, I agree with you, especially in commercials. Okay, so get this: the day The Light of the Moon came out at the IFC here in New York, it was a limited release. We had 10 or 12 cinemas around the States and North America. I was finishing off a water commercial, and I needed to get down to the cinema. Like these people didn't know I was editing it. So these people didn't know that I had a feature film coming out down the road, and I needed to go. And these people were am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
Sure, a little bit, sure. Go for it.
Okay, so I call it pixel fucking, when just like people are just
I know. No, that's a term I used years ago. Yes, pixel fucking.
Yeah, and I was just like, I could tell then that I couldn't do this anymore, because I was like, and I'm not, I'm someone who usually is quite pleasant, but I was being so short. Like, can we wrap? And I literally, I think I said in the room, we're not curing cancer, guys. Like, I was like, yeah, let me
it's
go.
enough.
I need to.
It's enough. Oh no, with commercials, you could spend weeks on the shot of the bottle. And just tweaking, and maybe a frame here, and can we get a light there? Maybe we could do a visual effect. Like, no, it's just endless, because there's so much money. They could just keep going and going. I was part of a project once that was 6 weeks for 3 commercials, 3 30-second commercials, 6 weeks. We just sat there all day waiting for clients to come in, move things here. Let's add that. It was absolutely insane. Commercials. So that's definitely like, but now I will say I really respect the editors that I work with. And I think another thing, and I don't know if you get this, Alex, but like people think that I'm going to be really controlling over my editor, because but I'm actually the opposite. I'm like, no, I respect them so deeply, because they are another storyteller. I literally said to Tom Elkins, who edited this, I was like, Tom, that director's cut, like that first 6 weeks of that director's cut time is yours. Like, don't show me anything. You just craft the story and do whatever you want, and literally go with your gut, because you're going to then show me things that I didn't even think of editing it that way. And that's the joy, and that's the collaboration. And he was like, wow, I thought you were going to be like over breathing down my neck. And I was like, no, of course there's going to be some scenes where I'm like, nice try, but let's like do it this way. But then there was a couple of scenes, especially with the scares, because he's like, a horror aficionado and has, edited a lot of big horror films. He really like showed me something that I knew I captured, but like that he showed me it in a different way, which was really incredible. And and as an editor, I always love handing off the grunt work of organizing all the dailies and the bins, and like that's brutal. So I'm like, when I actually sat down, I'm like, oh, all the work's done for me now. Oh, this is nice. Oh, I don't have to do this anymore.
So funny when at the end of the film, the editor and the assistant editor know the movie so much better than you, and like they'll be like, "Oh, that's scene 42, part 4."
Right.
I'm like, I remember being that person who like knew every single bin and knew every single file name.
I'll tell you one quick story. That when you were talking about like having to work on a commercial and trying to get into doing a directing at the same time with the pixel fucking, I was post supervising, coloring, and VFX supervising a $10 or $15 million show for Hulu. At the same time, prepping an entire series that I was producing, my production company was producing, and I was directing. And I told everybody what was going on, but then I had to overlap. So I would, like, my first day, I almost died. First day, shot 12 hours, went home, had to edit, conform, export something out because Hulu wanted it. So I woke up the next morning. I had to do that for 2 or 3 days because it overlapped, and I needed to get that episode out in order to get it out for Hulu for that week. And it was just brutal. And it's probably one of the most brutal production times of my life. But it was just like,
I mean, and you have to go through it, but it's so hard to like be present. Present in the more survival job one. It's so hard to be present. I remember one time I was on like a third date with a guy, and I was transferring cards. So every like hour I was like, "Excuse me, you got to go." And so I would we were at a bar, right? But it was near my house, and I would like run back upstairs to transfer cards and run back down. I was like, "This is me trying to have a life while."
Oh, that's amazing. Because he's like, "Look, I want to have the date, but I got cards transfers. I have to transfer the cards. I'm sorry."
Yeah. I mean, it's just so I literally would set an alarm every 45 minutes and then.
But that's the insanity that we are insane. I mean, filmmakers are insane. Artists are insane in general, but filmmakers are a different breed of insanity.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, because it's just it's an obsession. I call it the beautiful disease because once you get it, you can't get rid of it. Like, you can't get rid of this.
We torture ourselves. Then you can't get rid of it. Once you're stung, you're done.
You're done. Now tell me about your new film, The Invitation. It is stunning. It looks beautiful. And now you mentioned Hungary, so I was like, okay, that makes more sense now because I'm assuming this castle wasn't in Texas. So
no, I made it. I built it all.
Is that all? It's a Marvel movie budget. You have a Marvel movie budget, absolutely. So tell me about it.
The Invitation, so it's about a young woman who's an artist down and out in the luck in New York, and she just recently lost her mom, and she does a DNA test and finds out she has a long lost relative. And he invites her to this lavish wedding, and basically everything goes awry. It turns into a horror film. But it's really like a mashup of genres, which is what drew me to the script, the initial script that Blair Butler wrote, and then we rewrote it together and kind of worked on it together. I loved one that it was an origin story of the Brides of Dracula, which I was like, I have not seen this, and I want to make it. But also that to me, the metaphor was all laid in there in terms of like sticking it to the man and smashing the patriarchy and all that, but without hitting it over the head. It was entertainment first, and that's always what I want to do. And then immediately, one of the biggest things was I wanted the lead to be a woman of color. Because I felt that added once again another layer. Literally, it's the metaphor is the rich eating the poor, the upstairs downstairs worlds, and then having a woman of color adds another layer to that story. If Dracula, what we're doing is saying he represents the pinnacle of the patriarchy, and he's got all these people in cahoots with him, supporting him, which is how these people work. Harvey Weinstein, all that, they didn't work in a vacuum. There was people who were keeping them up there. And that's what the film was all about. Without belaboring the point.
Sure.
And then Blair and I worked on the script, really focusing on those character relationships, building those arcs, those character arcs, and really grounding the dialogue. I really love naturalistic dialogue and humor, and peppering more humor throughout. And then Natalie Emanuel came on board, who was always like my top choice for the role, and I was so glad that she saw herself in the character. And then it kind of all snowballed from there. So Screen Gems, obviously making it with Screen Gems. So my first studio film took me I had to pitch it like 4 times to all the different people there. And then it was right at the start of the last meeting, March 16th, 2020, before the world shut down.
So stop for a second. So now everybody listening, you now have a studio, and I've had, by the way, so many filmmakers have been on the show that's had this exact problem. I got the show, I got green lit, and the entire world shuts down. And then, of course, the filmmaker thinks, why me? Like, the entire world's burning, but we're like, but I want to shoot my movie. We're insane.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. It's crazy. So literally, I would say like the last Steve Bursch, the president of Screen Gems, I want to say that the last thing was that he shook my hand and said, you got the job. We did it. We fist bumped because pandemic. And he was like, okay. And now we're all shutting down Sony pictures. So that was the last meeting he took, the last meeting I took. But I got the official, you've got the job. Luckily, though, because I still had to rewrite, there's still work to do on the script. And we thought, the pandemic's going to be 3 weeks or whatever.
3 months, we'll be fine.
But it did give us time to really perfect the script and really work on it. And then, it took a little bit longer than I wanted it to get the green light to get it into production. But then, we swung into production. I think I flew over to Hungary in June of 2021. So not a crazy wait.
But and that's the other thing I hear from a lot of filmmakers that went through this process. They're like, oh, we had all the time in the world to do a recut, to do the pickup shots, to figure out what we would do. So if they were in production and had to stop, they can go back, edit. And they're like, oh, we really need to do this. So they kind of rewrote. So you had time, which is something that.
And I will say we got shut down twice during production for COVID, just 2 days each time. And I will say that one of them fell right in the middle of the shoot, the 40-day shoot. And we had, so the whole crew got a long weekend. And I will say everyone came back refreshed. And I was like, maybe we need to just put a 4-day weekend in the middle of every shoot. Because it really the energy check. So I think there is some point. It taught us to slow down a little bit, which is maybe a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I always ask this question on The Invitation. What we all have that day that the entire world is coming crashing down around us as directors. And I argue to say that's every day there's something that happens like that. But there's always the one day that was just such a massive thing. What was the worst day and the worst thing that happened to you on the set, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I'm with you. Every day there's always a new challenge, right? And I love the challenges. They often end up becoming the biggest joy when you finally get through it. But I am like an insanely well-prepared and organized director. So I think my challenges are usually pretty limited. I'm not saying that. It's just I'm so insane on organization. I'm kind of a little bit micromanaging that way. But I will say there was a day that I came in, there was this ice house scene, and there was hardly any ice. And I was like, what? How did this get miscommunicated? It's literally called the Ice House. And then, so we had to move all the ice from one side. Whenever I couldn't do like any wides because I couldn't, which I love an epic wide. Yeah. So then everyone had to like move the ice from one side when we wanted to shoot on that side and then move the ice to the other side. And then also we definitely spoken about, because we had 3 actors, one who was a 65-year-old woman, lying on top of these ice blocks. And we definitely talked about having 3 blocks of fake ice for them to do that. And they did not show up. So I could not believe I had to ask my actors to do this. They were all willing to do it. One of them, though, got so cold that we needed to take, she almost got hypothermia. She had to go get, warmed up because she was her lips were so blue, So I just felt like there was so many miscommunications that day. And I was just like, as a director, you want to, especially my responsibilities are to the actors, to make sure their life is easy, to make sure they're safe and they're happy. And so I just felt like, it's just more like I felt like I'd let them down. Mm-hmm. And that's hard for me, is when it's, especially when I know that even if it is my fault, like it is or isn't my fault. It's like, I hate having to let my actors down for whatever reason. So that was a hard day, emotionally hard day, because I was just like, and I knew as well, it took longer to shoot, right? Because now I had to cut out some of the shots that I really, and I still think the scene looks beautiful and it's absolutely effective and it's great. But I just, having to like stop every however long to move all these giant ice blocks was just like crazy.
I have to tell, because when you were saying this, a story came into my head when I was doing my demo reel back in the day, shot it on 35 for commercials, right? It was a club scene. It was supposed to be inside of a club, and it's some sort of comedy spot that I was doing. And we get there, and the extras that my quote unquote production manager was supposed to get me, they didn't show up. So it's a club scene. You need you need people to be dancing and moving around. Even if it's by the bar, you still need like 5 people, 10 people I can get into a frame. And it was so bad. The footage was so bad because I was starting out. I was just starting out as a director. It was so bad that I had to. Eventually, I burned the negative, and I had to reshoot the entire thing later. It cost me another $10,000 out of my credit card to reshoot it. But I remember that. I still remember the footage in my eye. I still remember in my mind seeing the dailies. I'm like, I can't release this. This is horrendous. And it's just sometime, and I couldn't overcome it that day. I had two DPs at the same time. Have you ever worked with 2 DPs at the same time?
No. I mean, on a splinter unit, but not.
No. On the day at the same time. See, I didn't know enough to say no to that. So I had to deal with 2 DPs who were both
egomaniacs.
and idiots, lit the thing horribly. So these are hard lessons that cost me tens of thousands of dollars. Yeah. That's one of those.
You've got to, the thing is, what people don't realize, you put your name on this. So it's got to, the buck stops with you. So if it's not going to look good, that's all on you, They're
not going to go, let's give her the job anyway, but the DP did a bad job. No, it's you.
No, that's why you got to keep fighting. You got to always keep fighting.
Now, when is
and I've learned how to fight differently over the years, I should say. I've realized that it's not always best to come in just guns blazing. Like you've got to there's different techniques to fight. So it's like, if you know something's really vitally important, there's something that I've learned a lot in this process is that if someone has a crazy idea, you've got producers, you've got executives, you've got bosses above you, especially in the studio system. Let them try it and let them fail.
Absolutely.
Just like, if you know it won't work. So you telling them this won't work because of A, B, and C doesn't help them because they can't visualize it the way you can. So the best thing to do is to just take the time. And it's sad that you have to tell your editor, look, I know this is laborious, but do it and show them why it won't work. Otherwise, because me telling them, they're just going to think I'm being, difficult and not wanting to participate,
I don't know if you ever did this when you were editing, but I always used to love doing this. I would always throw a red herring into the edit for the client. I would throw something that's so purposely bad, a misspelling, the cut obviously was wrong, something that they would justify their position in the room.
Yeah.
It works.
Absolutely.
It always works because they
give
just
them
need
something to talk about.
give them like, oh man, that cut, we got to get rid of that cut. Oh, thanks for catching that. I appreciate that very much. As opposed to like, it's perfect. And like, then they start screwing with your cut.
Yeah, exactly. Really hoping none of those people are listening to this podcast, but that's exactly what I do. I was like, leave that in there. Yeah.
Generally they don't.
I was like, leave that in there. Yeah, absolutely. Put that in there, let them comment on it, because then they will ignore the other thing that I want to keep in.
You got to give them something big to look at. But start a fire over here so they ignore the bank robbery over here.
Exactly. No, that's the best.
When's the invitation out, and where can people see it?
August 26th, all around the world. 20,000 screens. Let's do it.
How many screens is it going to be? How many screens are you going to do? Is it 20,000?
20,000.
No, they're doing 20,000. Wow.
I mean, I know it's three. I know, yeah, I think it's 3,000 in the US. And then I think it's like somewhere between 15 to 20,000 in the world. My mom, it was really funny because obviously with the Light of the Moon, when it played in Australia, she lives an hour and a half north of Sydney, but also all the indie theaters are in Sydney. So she had to drive down and make it a day. And she's like, oh, do I have to do that? And I was like, Mom, it's going to be playing at the mall down the road. And she's like, at the mall? And I'm like, that's
awesome. I'm so happy about that, because indies not indies, but like non-IP based movies in today's world don't get that kind of theatrical.
Yeah, original ideas don't typically get.
And you don't have Tom Cruise in it, so it's not like a massive. Yeah. You have just really great actors in it.
And I think Sony, believes in the fact that they gave us a summer release date before we'd even finished shooting. I mean, they obviously really love the film, and I'm glad. They're incredible partners, and so I'm excited to see how the world responds to it.
Oh my God, that's amazing! Congrats on that. Now I'm going to ask you a few questions to ask all my guests. What advice would you give a filmmaker trying to break into the business today?
Don't give up. Persevere. Just keep going.
Grind it out.
All the no's. Everyone gets no's. Don't. Hustle. Like this is your thing. You got to hustle. You got to work all the jobs. I know. And at the start, no job is beneath you. I'm sorry. At the start, absolutely. No job is beneath you. Of course, if you're directing something, you should be really picky. You should have discernment. Absolutely. That's I'm saying when you're just earning your stripes, do it all.
I mean, I just had a guest on last week that they did wedding videos at the beginning.
Oh, no. That was my number one. Oh, sorry. I didn't even mention that. When I moved to New York, I used to do very high-end wedding videos for a lot of, kind of aristocratic New Yorkers. And that was one of my main gigs. And I will say the tips from the dad of the bride were fantastic.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, and I still to this day, I'm a big tequila girl, and Class A is always my favorite tequila. I still, from a client that I edited, that I directed their wedding video, they still send me a bottle of Class A Azul every year.
That's amazing.
I mean, it was great, to be honest, because it's one day, and there's a lot of money in it. So that's like you said, you've either got to do jobs that are adjacent. So like editing jobs, like things where you can learn the craft and when you can build connections, or you need to figure out how to make the most amount of money with the little amount of effort so that you can focus on your writing and your filmmaking.
Absolutely. No question. Now, what is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film industry or in life?
I don't think I've learned it yet. Patience.
Me too. No, me too. That's my number one. Patience. It's patience.
Yeah,
it's never
patience
fast
is a virtue. I'm definitely better than I was. Like I used to have absolute, fits, crying fits when I was like 14 because I hadn't won an Oscar. No joke. I was like absurd. So I definitely am much calmer than I used to be as a human being, but I'm still learning it. I'm still learning patience.
And 3 of your favorite films of all time.
I hate these questions. There's so many.
Today.
Okay. Today, The Shining, Stanley Kubrick is always my number one horror, and I could watch that film every year. It's just, I don't know, every time It's a masterpiece.
Did you watch Room 2? Was it 2 the documentary?
Yeah, I actually really. I mean, but I actually knew all those things because I'm such a geek that I kind of knew all the little facts.
So good.
And the new what was the one with Ewan McGregor? I actually thought was not awful. It's nowhere near The Shining.
Doctor Sleep.
Doctor Sleep. I actually thought it was good, but it was better than I expected. I expected it to be atrocious. So I was into it. Yeah. So The Shining. Ang Lee, Brokeback Mountain. I've never had a film that I thought about for like 5 days after and that I kept getting emotional about, that I was just like, why couldn't they be together? And I was like, it was just one of those films that just like really moved me and broke my heart. So, you know, so that one for emotional reasons. And then the last one, I'm going to be douchey and say Cinema Paradiso.
Of course. That's so much fun.
Yeah, it's great. And I love the child in it. And I just think it's like, you know, a classic that I love. Actually,
which one? Add one more. Go ahead.
All About Eve and On the Waterfront. They're also like, they're all about Eve and On the I love those films. So those three are they all go together.
I mean, and I like Sullivan's Travels. I mean, you could just watch that. Person Sturgis.
Absolutely.
I mean, just any movies about making movies, I always love watching. State and Maine.
Absolutely.
The Player.
But what's so crazy with All About Eve is that it still works now. You can literally make All About Eve now. Maybe I should look into this. But like, and it actually is still extremely relevant. I love that film.
No
love
question. Jess, it has been an absolute pleasure and honor talking to you. It's been so much fun. Congrats on your success and the invitation. And I can't wait to see what you come up with next. I really appreciate you, my dear.
Thank you, Alex. It's been so much fun.